She's just the hired help. She's not a child in this family. My mother said that in front of customers, partners, and even relatives, right in the middle of the event, that I, Maribel Knox, had been running behind the scenes to keep everything moving. I stood there, my hands still dusted with flour, hearing every word clearly. 7 years of unpaid work, 7 years of taking the hardest shifts, the angry customers, the mid-service disasters, and with one sentence, I was pushed from daughter to hired help. I'm going to tell you what happened after that sentence. But before I continue, if your family ever said something like this about you, what would you do? Has anyone ever had a relative treat your sacrifices like they were just expected? Hit like and comment I have if you understand that numb, stinging feeling, so I know I'm not alone in this story. That party was one of the biggest events our family kitchen had taken on all year. An anniversary celebration for the local church. Over 100 guests, a menu list so long it filled 2 full pages. The kitchen was blazing hot. Knives hitting cutting boards, oven doors opening and shutting, people calling out to each other nonstop. I stood in my usual spot, tucked back by the rear stove, where no one saw you unless they deliberately stepped in. I wore the same faded apron, dried flowers stuck along my sleeves at the wrists. My mother's words weren't a sudden outburst. She spoke slowly, clearly, like she was explaining a technical detail to a client. The name Maribel never appeared in her introduction, like it was a forbidden word. No one in the room spoke up. No one gave an awkward laugh. No one looked uncomfortable. That silence felt like a slap, confirming that, in their eyes, the name Maribel Knox had already been erased from the list of family. I looked down at the last tray of cakes. The frosting on top was slightly uneven. I used a spoon to smooth it flat. The motion was so familiar my hands did it before my mind caught up. Someone walked past and paused for a second. Their eyes flicked from my apron toward the banquet room where my mother stood laughing and talking. Then they turned away without saying a word. In the kitchen, no one asked if I was okay. No one told me to stop. The work still had to run. The orders still had to go out on time. I set the tray onto the cart and pushed it through the narrow hallway leading out front. When the kitchen door opened, laughter from the banquet room poured in. I caught someone praising how professional everything was. Someone else nodded and turned to shake my brother's hand. He stood right beside my mother, crisp button-down shirt, a drink in his hand, smiling and accepting thanks like it was all simply supposed to happen. No one looked at me when I pushed the cart back into the kitchen. But as I passed the long row of tables, I could feel something had shifted. A few eyes lingered on me longer than usual. Not pity, not curiosity. The look people give when they've just heard something that forces them to rearrange where you belong in their head. I went back to my spot and kept cleaning, gathering parchment paper, wiping counters, checking oven temperatures. Everything stayed on schedule. Only one thing was off, small but enough for me to notice: the way they talked about me, the way they looked at me, the way they stayed silent when my mother said that sentence. When the party was almost over, my mother walked into the kitchen. She didn't look at me. She only asked one short question. "Are you done?" I nodded. She turned away immediately, like that answer was all she needed. I stayed alone in the kitchen for a few more minutes. The noise had died down. Only the smell of food cooling in the air remained. I took off my gloves and set them beside the sink. In that moment, a thought flashed through me. Fast, but not new. Maybe, in their eyes, I was never a daughter the way I had always believed. And if they could say it in front of outsiders today, then maybe they'd been thinking it for a long time. The next morning, I came into the kitchen like I always did. It was still early in Indiana. The parking lot was empty, cold wind slipping through the back door as I unlocked it. I turned on the lights, pulled the curtains, set my bag down on the stainless steel table. I preheated the ovens, the sound of the flame, the smell of dry flour. My hands could tell what was missing and which tray needed to go in first with my eyes closed. This kitchen didn't need instructions, it ran on my instincts. No one told me what to do, but everything still waited for me to do it first. Near noon, my mother's phone started ringing nonstop. I heard her talking in the front room, excited, making the same familiar promises. When she stepped into the kitchen, she just handed me a new list, placed it on the table, and walked away. Not one question. I started making bullet points, organizing the order, adjusting the timing myself to make it work. My brother showed up later, clean shirt, hair neatly combed. He stood at the kitchen doorway, smiling at someone outside, then finally leaned in. "Everything good?" he asked, already looking somewhere else. I nodded. He gave my back a light pat, just enough to look caring if anyone happened to see, then walked back out to the banquet room where the compliments were waiting, one batch of cake cracked on top. I adjusted the heat, swapped the tray, started over. No one knew. One order ran 5 minutes late because a client changed the timing. I called, apologized, rearranged the schedule myself. No one asked. When something went wrong, I stepped in. When everything was fine, I stepped back. 7 years ago, I left my air-conditioned office job in the city because of one sentence. The family needs you. Now, looking at the burn scar on my hand from the oven, I finally understood. My mother didn't need a daughter. She needed a machine that ran on food and never got tired. That afternoon, a couple walked into the kitchen, smiling politely. They looked around, nodding, then turned to my brother. "Thank you, everything was wonderful," the man said, holding out his hand. My brother accepted the praise and said a few humble lines. I stood right there, wiping my hands on my apron. The woman glanced at me, gave a polite smile, then looked away. No one asked my name. After they left, I cleared the table and stacked the tools. Metal clinked, dry and sharp, and one question hung in the air, never spoken, but always there. Was I here for my family, or because I'd gotten used to no one waiting for my answer? After that, work stopped flowing on its usual autopilot. One morning, I opened the leather scheduling book and saw a line crossed out in a different color ink. The weekend event had been moved up by an hour. No one told me. I adjusted the plan in my head, rearranged the prep order, and kept going like normal. By noon, a client called asking about a special dish we'd agreed on. I flipped through the book. No note. The call ended with a short apology from me, and then I rushed into the storage room to find replacement ingredients. That evening, I heard my mother talking in the hallway. Her voice was lower, faster. Words like new orders, different method, quick and clean slipped through the half-closed kitchen door. When I stepped out, the conversation stopped. My mother smiled and handed me another list. No explanation. I looked it over and saw familiar items renamed. Some tasks I did every single day, but now they were written under a different category, in handwriting that wasn't mine. I started writing things down, not to argue, not to prove anything, just the habit of someone who's worked long enough to notice when the rhythm suddenly goes off. I noted what time I arrived, what time I left. I wrote down changes no one warned me about. I even recorded the moments I heard a decision had already been made before I ever got a chance to speak. My brother started showing up in the kitchen more, not to work, just to watch. He asked vague questions, nodded like he was learning. Once, he suggested trying a new way for a dish I'd made hundreds of times. I followed it to avoid noise. The result wasn't good. A guest complained lightly. I fixed it in silence. No one mentioned his suggestion again. One late afternoon, I walked into the break room to get water. On the wall assignment board, the names had been rewritten neatly. Out of habit, I searched for mine. It wasn't there. I looked again, top to bottom. The familiar positions were still listed, but my name had disappeared. In its place was a new name, stiff handwriting, fresh ink. I stood still for a few seconds. No one was there to explain or deny it. The ventilation fan hummed above. I poured a cup of water, took a small sip, and hung the cup back where it belonged. When I went back into the kitchen, I kept working as if that board didn't exist. At this point, what do you think the main character should do? Keep quietly working to keep the peace or confront it immediately? Let me know what you think in the comments. But from that moment on, the small pieces started fitting together, the schedule changes, the decisions made behind my back, my name erased from the place that used to record my work. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask anything. I stayed in my place and watched, while the unease spread, slow but steady like water seeping through a crack I'd gotten used to pretending I couldn't see. That night, after the kitchen was cleaned up, my mother called me into the small room in the back. The room we used to store invoices and boxes of dried spices. The fluorescent light clicked on, its white glare making everything look hard and cold. My mother leaned against the table, arms crossed. I stood across from her, just far enough away that we wouldn't touch. She got straight to it. Said I'd been noticing little things lately. Said everyone was trying their best. Said I should understand my brother because he was learning the job. I listened, staring at a small scratch on the tabletop. When I opened my mouth, she lifted her hand, gentle but firm. "You're too sensitive," she said. Her voice stayed even, not raised, like it was a conclusion she'd made 1,000 times. There was a very short beat where I inhaled, then exhaled. My throat burned. I nodded, even though no question had been asked. She turned and started sorting a stack of papers as if the conversation was done. I walked out and closed the door behind me. My hand stayed on the handle for one extra second, then let go. In the kitchen, the work was waiting. A tray of meat needed to be remarinated. I did it, slower than usual. The familiar smell of spices rose up. As I mixed, an old memory flashed through me. The first time my brother ruined an order, I was the one who apologized to the customer. The times he was late, I lied and said he was stuck in traffic. Back then, my mother told me I knew how to think for the family. I believed that long enough that I no longer remembered when I started believing it. The next day, I arrived early. The assignment board had been changed. My brother's name was written bolder in the position I used to stand in. Next to it was someone new, young, not familiar with the work. My mother introduced her quickly and said I would help her out today. I looked at the board, then down at my kitchen shoes. The laces were worn near the toe. I bent down and tied them again, tighter than necessary. My work was handed to someone else right in front of me. I was moved to support tasks, no explanation. No one asked if I agreed. A customer stepped into the kitchen, looked around, and seemed surprised to see me in a different corner. Someone asked quietly, "You don't do that part anymore?" I shook my head and forced a smile, that was all. By noon, the kitchen pace was frantic. The new girl fumbled. My brother stood nearby, talking more than doing. I quietly fixed mistakes. Sweat soaked the back of my shirt. When a tray almost burned, I pulled it out just in time. No one looked at me. My mother walked past, put her hand on my brother's shoulder, and said, "You're doing great." I stood there, still holding my gloves, hearing the oven door shut. A half-formed question rose up, one that didn't need an answer yet. If I walked away while everything was this tense, who would stay behind to carry what was still unfinished? That morning, the church parking lot was packed. Cars lined up, greetings echoing through the main hall. This was the biggest event of the year. Our kitchen had been preparing for weeks. I arrived earlier than usual, double-checking the menu list, oven temperatures, each tray labeled and ready. The pace was tight as a wire. One small mistake could throw the whole day off. When guests started flooding in, my brother appeared with his usual confidence. He walked around, shook hands, laughed, then stepped into the kitchen. The main course had to go out on time. I reminded him of the serving order. He nodded and said he had it. I turned to prep the next part. Less than 10 minutes later, a tray was sent out earlier than planned. The heat wasn't high enough. Guests reacted immediately. The murmurs spread fast. I stepped forward and signaled to pause, but my brother had already gone back into the banquet room. Out there in front of everyone, he spoke loudly, loud enough for the kitchen to hear. The schedule got messed up because she changed things at the last minute. A few eyes turned toward me. I froze, my gloves still in my hands. Some words aren't a slip. They're the truth. I stepped half a pace forward, about to explain. My mother was already beside him. She didn't look at me. She told the guests everything would be adjusted quickly. Then she turned to me, her voice low but clear. Go outside for a bit. She didn't say it loudly, but it was firm enough that everyone heard. I saw the new girl beside me look confused. I took off my gloves and set them on the table. No one stopped me. In the hall, soft music still played. I stood in the corridor and looked through the small glass window into the kitchen. Inside, someone else was doing my job, clumsy, rushed. I knew that if I walked back in, I could fix it. One step and I could fix it. But this time I didn't. My mother came out and spoke quickly, saying this wasn't the time for feelings. My brother stood behind her, not looking at me. I nodded once and said nothing. I walked toward the back exit. Cold air slapped my face. I stood there for a few seconds, hearing the noise inside still going on, like the kitchen had never needed me. I took out my phone and stared at the dark screen. No calls, no messages asking where I was. I slid it back into my pocket and took a few more steps. Each step was steady, not rushed. This time I didn't turn around. I didn't go back into the kitchen. Not because of a sudden burst of anger, but because everything inside had already chosen how it wanted to run. I walked along the back path past bare trees stripped by the cold wind toward the parking lot. The door shutting behind me was barely a sound. No one ran after me. No one called my name. I opened the trunk, set my bag inside, then stopped. My apron was still on me. I untied it, folded it neatly, and laid it on the trunk lid. Dried flour dust fell onto the car. I didn't brush it off. I closed the trunk and left the apron there like a period. This faded apron was the only thing that witnessed 7 years of my youth. Do you have any keepsake, old, worn out, but holding an entire chapter of your life that you still can't bring yourself to throw away? Share your story with me. Inside, the event kept going. I knew because the music drifted out from the big doors, steady, trying to keep its rhythm. I stood there a moment longer, watching people hurry in and out carrying trays. No one noticed I'd left. That felt both relieving and cold. I drove out along the small road behind the church. The traffic light turned from red to green. I stopped behind the line, then kept going. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I didn't look. It buzzed again. I signaled, pulled over, and turned off the engine. Silence filled the car. I let the phone sit. I didn't wake the screen. On the other side of town, a small diner was still open. I walked in and ordered black coffee. The ceramic mug set down with a soft clink. I took a sip. Bitter, sharp. The rain outside wasn't colder than the silence in my phone. No message asking if I was okay, only calls pressuring me to come back and handle orders. In my family's kitchen, I pictured them scrambling. The new girl standing in the wrong spot, a tray going out late, someone asking about timing, my brother answering hesitant, my mother making quick decisions, maybe right, maybe wrong. I wasn't there to fix it. And this time, I wasn't walking in to save it. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up and looked at the name on the screen. I set it back down on the table, face down. No call was answered. No explanation was offered. The kitchen started falling apart. My absence wasn't just an empty space anymore. It was burned trays of cake. It was orders being sent back by customers. When I stood up to leave the diner, it was fully dark outside. I pulled my coat tight at my neck and walked to my car. My hand on the door handle, I paused for a very brief beat. Not to hesitate, just to make sure that this time I was choosing to stay outside. And the question was still hanging there, clearer than ever. How were they going to manage when the person they were used to having behind the scenes was no longer in the same old place? 3 days later, the first signs appeared. Not loud, not an immediate collapse, just small glitches stacking up, enough to make the people inside start to tense up. One customer called to complain that the food wasn't consistent. One event was canceled at the last minute because of a lack of stability. I heard it through someone I knew in the neighborhood. Their voice lowered like they were sharing something that shouldn't travel far. My brother started showing up on social media more. Photos in the kitchen, every angle, carefully avoiding the mess behind him. Short captions, confident, but I saw something else in his eyes. Urgency. People I knew texted asking if I still worked there. I answered simply, no, nothing more. One afternoon, while I was tidying up the small apartment I was renting temporarily, my phone buzzed nonstop. 3 missed calls from the kitchen's number, then messages, short lines, no periods. Where are you? Can you call back? The customers are waiting. I set my phone on the table and kept wiping the shelf. The sound of the wet rag dragging over wood was louder than usual. That night, I received an email canceling 2 more events that month. The number formed in my head immediately, even though no one said it out loud. How much money each event meant. How many hours of prep. I knew because I used to be the one who calculated it. Now I just read it, then closed it. That night, it poured. I was asleep when my phone buzzed. Once, then again. The clock read close to midnight. My mother's name lit up the screen. I sat up and leaned back against the wall. The rain hit the window in a steady rhythm. I picked up the phone, feeling the chill of the screen through my hand. The call stopped. Then it came again. On the other side of a town, I pictured them scrambling. My brother standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the clock. The new person asking what to do. My mother making faster decisions than usual. No one behind them quietly correcting the small details. Everything moving in a rushed rhythm, with nothing to lean on. My phone buzzed again. I looked at my mother's name, then flipped the phone face down. Not as revenge. Just because I needed that empty space to speak for me. The silence stretched for a few more seconds, then the screen went dark. I lay back down and pulled the blanket over my shoulder. Outside, the rain kept falling. The family kitchen reputation started to crack. My mother could no longer stand up straight to introduce it. My brother no longer dared to post bragging photos. They started tasting what it's like to have only the shell without the core. A community meeting was announced urgently. The church's community room was lit up early, chairs lined up in neat rows. I arrived a few minutes late and chose a seat in the back. People turned to look at me, then looked away. No one said hello. The air was heavy, like everyone knew what they were waiting for but didn't dare name it. My mother stood near the long table in front with my brother. She spoke first in that familiar, soothing tone that the recent issues were just staffing problems, that our family still had things under control. My brother nodded along with each sentence, his hand on the table, trying to look calm. A few people whispered. Someone glanced at me, then looked forward again. When the person behind the scenes steps into the light, no one can pretend anymore. I stood up without waiting to be called on. I walked straight to the front table, pulled the thick order book out of my apron pocket, and slammed it down on the table. Mom says it's staffing problems? Then explained to the board why the 3 biggest orders for next week have already been canceled. And why the food in storage keeps going bad because my brother doesn't know how to adjust the oven temperature. I looked straight at everyone in the room. For 7 years, I've been the only person who knows our family's secret sauce recipe. And today, I'm announcing this. I'm taking that recipe with me. This kitchen is my brother's now, the one Mom just praised for doing great. My mother went silent, her face turning pale in the middle of the relatives' murmurs. That was the first time I'd ever seen her unable to land on a final verdict. A lot of people will say that, as a child, you shouldn't air your family's dirty laundry. But others will say that if you're not decisive even once, you'll spend your whole life as a shadow. What do you think? Was my taking the recipe back the right move or too far? Pick your side below. I closed the book, the leather cover hitting the table with a dry thud. I looked at my mother, then at the neighbors. A raw truth had just been exposed. Without me, this family had nothing to sell but empty promises. When the meeting ended, a few people came up to me. They said short things, thanked me for clearing it up. I nodded and didn't linger. Up front, my mother stood still, gripping her purse tight. My brother walked faster, not turning back. I stepped outside and took a deep breath. It was dark. The streetlights flicked on one by one. Behind me, the door closed. And for the first time in years, the truth was no longer shoved into a corner. In the weeks that followed, everything didn't collapse with a bang like people imagine. It deflated, slowly, steadily, like a balloon losing air. The schedule thinned out. Blank spaces appeared on the board in the church hallway. Event names were crossed out, no makeup dates written in. I heard people saying the order volume dropped by almost half. No one said it loudly, but everyone knew. My family showed up less at community gatherings. When they did, they sat apart. My mother no longer stood to speak. My brother stopped posting kitchen photos. I heard he was assigned to different work, no longer representing the kitchen. There was no official announcement, just a quiet shift, enough for everyone to understand that position had slipped away. I didn't go back. I wasn't invited either. The messages came less and less, then stopped completely. One afternoon, I drove down the familiar road and looked toward the church's back door. The kitchen lights were off. Inside was darker than I expected. Through the glass, I saw empty stainless steel tables. No trays, no people. The sight made me stop for a few seconds. I sat there, my hands on the steering wheel, staring into that familiar emptiness. An old image flashed, brief and sharp. Me, years ago, standing in that same place, head down, tying my kitchen shoes, getting ready for a long day. Back then, I thought if I just did well enough, everything would be fine. The image disappeared as fast as it came. The kitchen looked emptier than it ever did in my memory, not because it lacked people, but because it lacked rhythm. I inhaled, then drove away. I didn't look back. My family doesn't call me hired help anymore. They don't call me their daughter either. Between us is a long silence with no name yet. I don't know what it will become. Some nights, when the apartment is quiet, I feel hollow. Not because I'm lacking work, but because I'm missing a habit that had been welded onto me for too long. But at the same time, something else has appeared. I sleep better, I eat dinner without checking my phone, I plan my week without building it around someone else's schedule. Small things, very small, but enough to fill the space in a slow, steady way. Justice didn't arrive like a blazing victory, it arrived like a reordering. I lost a family in the way I used to know it. In exchange, I kept my own part, the part that had been set aside for years. And when I moved forward, with no kitchen behind me to return to, I knew the price wasn't light. But this time, I was walking on my own legs. I didn't leave carrying a sense of victory. There was no moment of raising my hands, no late apology that neatly closed everything out. Just a normal morning. I locked my apartment door, walked down the stairs, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The city was the same, people passing by, cars, the familiar sounds of life continuing to flow, not waiting for anyone to catch up or fall behind. Some days I miss the old kitchen, not the work, but the rhythm, the feeling of knowing exactly what came next. But then I understand too, doing more doesn't mean being respected. In that place, my dedication was something convenient, not something that was ever named. When I stayed long enough, that name faded until it was erased from the board. Now I stand in a new kitchen where people look me in the eye when they assign work, not call out to me from behind my back. I don't fold myself up anymore to fit into a family that was never mine, a place where silence isn't used to force someone to endure more. I move slower now. I weigh things more carefully. I don't put my dignity in someone else's hands anymore, hoping they'll hold it gently. If this story brought back a familiar feeling for you, I want to say this with complete sincerity. You aren't weak for leaving. You're just refusing a fake place to stand. There are families, groups, workplaces that survive on the silence of the person behind the scenes. When that person steps out, things don't fall apart immediately, but they're forced to face their own truth. And truth, even when it comes slowly, still finds a way to speak. I also want to be clear about one small but important thing. The story you just heard is fictional, inspired by real-life situations and human experiences. It was told with the support of AI tools and edited by a human, with the goal of offering reflection and emotion for viewers. The story does not encourage you to follow any specific action. Every choice in life needs to be weighed within your own circumstances. If there's one gift I could leave you with after this story ends, it's this. Don't trade your dignity just to keep a place where you have to shrink yourself to survive. You deserve to be somewhere that calls you by your real name, even if that place comes later than you once hoped. If you see the outline of a friend or a family member in this story, someone who's been quietly sacrificing until they've forgotten themselves, send this video to them. Sometimes the right understanding at the right time can save an entire life. Before I stop here, let me ask you one very simple question. Right now, where are you listening to this story? In the kitchen, in the car, or in a quiet room after a long day? If you saw yourself somewhere in this story, leave a comment. Even one short line is enough. If you feel like the story gave you something, hit like, so I know. And if you want to keep going with other stories on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for staying until the final minute. Your listening is what makes stories like this matter.